Happy Halloween. Curious City editor Alexandra Solomon here, and we are here today in honor of Halloween. Curious City did a call out. We asked you all to share your haunted tales, and we received all kinds of great ones that turned into a story and a podcast episode, which you'll see up at wbez.org/curiouscity. One of the scarier ones we got that sent chills up our spine was from Colin Santee. He got us started off on our reporting. And today we have the great pleasure of inviting Jeff Ruby, who was the intrepid reporter who took the helm of our haunted tale, which took us all the way to Barrington, Illinois. Yay. Jeff's a freelance writer here in Chicago. He has been writing for many decades. He has a knack for profiling all the interesting people that make the city tick. And we're also joined by Scott Marcus. He is a paranormal investigator, filmmaker. He's also the author of Voices from the Chicago Grave. One of the sites he's investigated is the site of our haunted tale. So, hey, Scott. Scott and Jeff are gonna chat for about 30 minutes. You all, if you have questions, are welcome to drop your questions into the chat. Again, you can check out our story, both the written piece and the podcast episode at wbez.org/curiouscity. And I am going to leave you two to chat.
Thank you, Alexandra. And Jeff the newbie is still on mute.
There he goes.
All right. I was going to say, Scott, it's good to see you there. Your bio sounded so much cooler than mine. It's like Jeff is a boring journalist. Scott Marcus does many cool things. But
freelance researcher also, or freelance journalist also insinuates that you everything is in your tapestry.
Or nothing, right?
Well, they don't know. It could be anything. Keep it mysterious.
Well, let's talk about this haunting. Nobody's interested in my minutia, but you've investigated a lot of things over the years. Is there anything in particular about this one that makes it stand out and makes it intriguing to you?
I mean, yeah, it is one of the gold standard of like what we're trying to do as paranormal investigators or researcher. I really do consider myself more of a researcher. I go on site in field and I've got some of the gadgets and whatnot, but I'm really more of an interviewer and historian, researcher, more so than an investigator. But for me, it was interesting from the very start because even before I really got into this, this field, it's something that I grew up hearing about. I'm from Mundelein, Illinois, so it's Lake County. It's, 20 or so minutes away from the house on Rainbow Road. So it's a place where I kept hearing these whispers in the high school hallways of this really creepy place. And whether you had a paranormal experience there or not, it was an alluring place that I definitely wanted to look into when I was putting my book together. Yeah.
What were some of the whispers that you heard that was so tantalizing?
Oh gosh, well, basically there was this abandoned house that was kind of somewhat locked in time, that it was just really, it's this big estate, barn, silo, other outbuildings, and this house that's just left behind. And people would go there and they would always, the way teenagers talk, especially, you're building up the stories and you're going out there and you're freaking yourself out. But, allegedly, at least finding maybe signs of, ritualistic satanic worship type stuff in the basement. Again, very possibly just urban legendy stuff, or just kids screwing around trying to scare the next kids that were coming out. But there were definitely some stories about, people hearing their names whispered to them in their ear as they're standing alone in a hallway. Or just, objects moving on their own, doors closing on their own. It definitely was one of the two big, really scary places that us Mundelein high school kids went to. The other one is called the Gate in Libertyville, Illinois. But both of those were really alluring, for sure.
Well, and Barrington, so the house on Rainbow Road is in Barrington, and Barrington has such a crazy history of weird events and violence and gangsters and a haunted cemetery and all this stuff. So I feel like there must be something in the air in Barrington that makes this possible. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wish we knew more. I mean, that's one of the things that makes it exciting, but it also makes it frustrating, is that we only have theories and we'll probably never really be able to solve any of these questions, like why is a certain area so haunted. It reminds me of Archer Avenue on the south side, Justice, Illinois, Resurrection Mary territory, where there just seems like every other address has a ghost story associated with it. And we don't really know why. We have theories like, in that case, limestone is believed that it really holds a lot of energy, and it's by running water going along the Cal-Sag Canal and the Illinois-Michigan. But we don't really have any guesses yet about the Cuba Road area. I'd say, Archer Avenue's north side counterpart. Why is Cuba Road? Why is Barrington so haunted? And just frankly, I don't know. It does have a long history of different. I mean, I guess any place you look at, there's going to be some darkness. But yeah, I think Barrington is a little elevated in some way, and I don't really know why.
Yeah. I mean, the more reporting we did on this story, the more kind of weird things came out that I didn't know about. For example, there was this story about this home intrusion or home invasion in 1972 that was almost Manson-esque, and it started as a robbery, or was intended to be a robbery, and ended up with 4 people dead. And that happened in, I think, North Barrington, and that was just like something that we found along the way almost, and it's almost like a footnote to the story, which is sad to say because it was a horrible tragedy, but it just was another in the long line of strange things that happened in this area, including Babyface Nelson's shootout with the feds in
the FBI. Yeah. I was so happy that made it in, because that's one of those things that it's Babyface Nelson. It was Public Enemy #1 after, I think he was the second one ever after Dillinger. And then he met his, or I guess maybe the third, because Capone was on that list too. All Illinois, Chicago represents very well on the top of those charts. But yeah, the fact that there was a big shootout that, we celebrate the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site on the north side of the city, but this being, I guess, a more remote place, it kind of gets forgotten that there was this really amazing shootout between, the remnants of John Dillinger's gang and the FBI with multiple murders, including Babyface Nelson being fatally wounded up not too far from Cuba Road and White Cemetery and the house on Rainbow Road. All this is right there.
And isn't there something funny about the fact that there's probably like a Walgreens on that corner, like right around there now? Like, history has just gotten paved over so many times that we forget about all these crazy things that happened in these places that we go to every day,
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I really loved, because I didn't grow up a history buff at all. I mean, I got through history class. I didn't love history class until I started getting into ghost stories. Unfortunately, I was kind of on my way, I guess, through and out of college before I really grasped onto how cool it is to understand history, because then the ghost stories actually have meaning. And before we get too far down the road, I'm just curious, because, this is, to me, a very celebrated personally story. I love the house on Rainbow Road story. It's very fascinating and intriguing to me. And so it was so exciting to see that you guys wanted to cover it. How did it come to you guys, or you?
So it didn't come to me personally, but WBEZ got a voicemail from a gentleman named Colin Santee, who was a fascinating character in his own right, with a really, really good radio voice. And he was turning it on the voicemail, like to sort of bolster his case. And it was literally just a story about him kind of waking up in the middle of the night and seeing someone standing in his doorway. I mean, just like classic ghost story. But he unfolded it into something much larger, which was that he was the son of the caretaker at the house on Rainbow Road. And so he said this house had all this history. And of course, I knew nothing about any of it. And it sounded like he was making things up. And what I wrote in the story was the crazy thing about it is so many of these legends are true, about things that happen in this house, including the sort of central part of it, which is the ghost story of a boy that died there in 1968, who happened to be a caretaker's son. Now, it wasn't Colin, obviously. I wasn't talking to the ghost of the dead caretaker, but
it didn't come through via Ouija board.
Right.
Yeah.
But the circumstances of this boy's death were strange and unusual, and sort of led to a lot of the theories that people have, and led to the like creepy feeling I think that people had surrounding this property. And I know that you, in some of your research, like, you came across. Tell me about your experience with this ghost of this boy.
Well, I mean, first off, I unfortunately for me don't have any amazing firsthand encounters as far as seeing or getting a wild photo or anything like that. But I was able to talk to enough witnesses, enough individuals that, have come out and said that, yeah, I've seen the boy too. And that they describe him anywhere from, back on the property along the driveway to all the way out, almost like where I would imagine that he'd be waiting for the school bus to pick him up. That's how I've always put that together in my mind. I'm just inventing that, but out by where the mailbox is at the end of the long driveway. And people had always seen him in fireman pajamas or in blue jean overall with a red shirt. Really, I mean, vivid. We're not just saying like, I think I saw something, but like people that have seen him have really had details, which is fascinating in and of itself. And the fact that you don't really hear about ghosts too often with wardrobe changes. So it's kind of neat to see the same ghost seen in a couple different ways. I think that's, I don't know, anytime there's something different, unique about a story, it stands out. And then, I mean, I love covering locations that I start out telling the story, thinking that it's an urban legend. It's a spooky place, a visually interesting or weird looking place that people have invented stories around. And then eventually finding out that, wow, there's some reality behind the legends, whether we meant to have some or not. And in this case, we didn't really know anything. I mean, the general, as teens, we're not really doing our due diligence. We're just going out and scaring ourselves. So we didn't know that there was a death of a little boy on site that matches the age, at least, of what people are seeing. So that alone was amazing to me. And then, fortunately, the family reached out to me, the Kokenauer family, who unfortunately had this family tragedy. And, my heart goes out to them, and I'm so appreciative of them that they're willing to share their story. They weren't put off. They were actually fascinated by the fact that the place they used to live is haunted, and that maybe their brother is still making his presence known in some way. And they just wanted to learn information. And so they were very open in giving information, including talking to their father, to find out that, yes, he did have fireman pajamas. Ooh. And the day he died, he was wearing blue jean overalls with a white shirt, which unfortunately was soaked red with blood by the time he passed away. Oh. And I mean, so that's, those are some devastating details, but it's amazing that we understand why people are seeing this vision decades and decades later. It's amazing. It's what, again, like I said, we're always looking for this when we're in the paranormal field, trying to solve these mysteries, and we almost never solve them. So that's why this one is so profound to me.
But it's fascinating too, because Carol Kokenauer, who was 4 years old, she sees her brother die in this death. Tragic, was too young really to remember much about her experience of living on that property. And then as a 19-year-old, a teenager years later, was among the teenagers who went to go and party in this abandoned house, which we'll get to in a second, and had no memory whatsoever of this being the place where she had experienced this trauma,
That's amazing. You did such a wonderful job finding so many great sources. And I was just so blown away listening to this episode because you tracked everybody down, it seems, that you could possibly wanted to talk to. and really filled in so many gaps that I didn't even know. So I can't believe how much I learned about a story I thought I knew a lot about.
Yeah,
So,
I was gonna say, when you've got WBEZ on your team, it's, you know, it's all hands on deck all the time.
well done though.
Thanks, thank you. But so this house had so many different lives beyond just this kind of creepy ghost story. You know, we talked to someone else who lived in the house, who we used her first name but didn't wanted to remain anonymous beyond that, but described how in that house the attic was the room of all the luck. Her bedroom had the attic right above her, and she heard noises up there for much of her childhood. And her parents, or her mom and her aunt, would go up there with holy water and spread it around. The noises would disappear, and then they would come back a little bit later. Like that, those are the kind of details that just kind of put a shiver up my spine, because it preys on all of those vulnerabilities. Little kid in bed in the dark hearing noises. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that was profound to me as well. I had the fortune to interview the same person when I was writing my book, and it was amazing to me to find out that, William's tragic passing wasn't the beginning of that property being haunted, that the family was experiencing things in that house before the tragedy. And like you said, having it blessed over and over again. And there's one room in particular that seemed to always be active. That was mind blowing. I had no idea that the hauntings predated the accident. Yeah. And then it also, of course, makes you wonder, now the property is completely different. The house is bulldozed, everything's cleared out. There's new houses on the property now. I'm very curious to find out, are the current tenants, and there's one lot left to be developed that I think has been sold but not yet developed. Are these people experiencing anything? I don't know. I would say likely, the fact that this has been going on for so long, but time will tell on that.
Well, what's interesting is, so of the people that we have just talked about who experienced this trauma don't want to go back there. They, think there might be a demon there, portal to hell in the woods,
Sure.
Just all kinds of things are keeping them from going back. And of course, the trauma, PTSD is the scariest ghost of all time, right?
Yeah.
But this house then had its sort of second life after the family that lived there moved out, and it fell into disrepair, as all good haunted houses do. And so it became this rite of passage, right, for teenagers to come and do whatever it is that teenagers do when their parents aren't around. And they basically spent years destroying this house, right?
Yeah. Partying in it, or just urban exploring. The people that I've talked to, at least what they would admit to me, was that they just kind of went there to kind of challenge themselves, to test their mettle. Can I go through the house? Can I see it all before getting scared away, and usually failing that challenge because something would spook them and they would, create a dust trail as they ran back down that long driveway. But yeah, so nobody would admit to me to doing any damage, but I definitely talked to people that said that they saw, when they would go there each time, it would be a little bit different, a little bit more beat up. And yeah, I mean, when something's not being taken care of, it's amazing how quickly it falls apart.
Yeah. And it sounded like maybe the holy grail for kids was going down to that basement, because apparently in the basement, now, whether there was actual Satan worship going on or it was just kids doing what's the difference? I don't know. But I think a lot of kids were pretty scared when they got down to that basement and they saw pentagrams on the wall. One of the people we talked to said there was obviously maybe it was you. There were signs of animal sacrifice, but maybe it was KFC. No one knows.
Exactly what I said. Yeah,
that was it. It was you. I'm sorry. I can't believe I forgot. I have to give you credit for that because it's such a good line. But regardless, there were so many generations, like multiple generations of kids would hop over this fence and just go be in this house.
Yeah.
And I wonder if just the scariness of going and doing this made kids think they saw things that they didn't or experienced things that they didn't.
Well,
I don't want
there's
to
no,
debunk anything, but I'm always curious about that.
well, there's a fascinating phenomena as well. That's, like everything else is just a theory, but it's one that I do hold a lot of stock in, which is that we living, breathing people can visit a site with a certain type of image in our mind or bringing a certain energy into it. And then in time, impressing that on the space. And so when you're talking about a location like this, where we are talking about decades of people going here, all with a very similar negative, scary feeling, can us living, breathing people make a place haunted? And this is a case where we know it actually is haunted, based on what the family was going through back in the 60s. So if we're just adding to that and bringing even more scary negativity in it, maybe it's making that place, that area, feel even more ominous. And again, it's always fascinating to see when a place goes through a big physical change, renovations, demolition, construction. Either things get really amplified or it just kind of ends things. A place that as powerful as the house on Rainbow Road location, I can't imagine that it would just be gone with the demolition and reconstruction. I'm curious to see. I'm really fascinated by the idea that something is we'll have a new generation of witnesses soon, and hopefully it'll never get as dark as it got, obviously, in 1968. But it's a creepy place, and I certainly don't blame any previous witnesses to anything for not wanting to ever step foot on that property again.
Yeah. I mean, the only living remnants of the creepiness for me when I went, of course, now it just looks kind of like any other gorgeous suburban subdivision, but
yeah,
the woods surrounding it are still creepy, especially when somebody told me they thought there was a portal to hell back there. And I said, okay, whether there is or there isn't, I'm not going to chance it. You know what I mean? But for the most part, you drive down this street and you think this just looks like any other street.
too idyllic.
And yet
Yeah.
people who refuse to go anywhere near it because it's so terrifying.
Well, I always love bringing up the Tim Burton comparison. Like if you think of the neighborhood in Edward Scissorhands, he does this so well, where this neighborhood is so pretty, it must have a seedy underbelly. Like it's hiding something. And I think Caitlin's Way, as the street is now, because the former driveway is now a street called Caitlin's Way. I think this could be a perfect example of a future Tim Burton filming location.
It's the Pasadena of the Chicago suburbs, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. You think that there might be some future story in this area here? I wonder if anybody who is watching this lives around there and has reported anything interesting, or if everybody just wants it all to go away at this point.
Right. I'm sure they do want that. But yeah, I would love to find out if anybody like anonymously wanted to reach out. I mean, be honest with me, but I wouldn't share your name or house address if you were afraid of that kind of a thing. But I mean, the Sunnybrook Asylum, as it was called, is a place near Fox Lake. That was one of the scariest places I'd ever visited. Bulldozed, housing development on top of it now. And I have had people in that development reaching out to me trying to understand why their house is haunted. Like, well, okay, I have some stories that you don't want to hear, but the place, it lives on. That energy, that consciousness, whatever it is, it does live on, even after big changes.
The idea that an entire community could ignore something that happened because it's like too painful or whatever, or
Right.
B, embrace it because it's exciting and interesting and all that. I feel like Barrington has kind of gone in both directions. There are people who just want to this is something that happened in the past, and yet this is a town that reenacted Babyface Nelson's that shootout. They actually had the entire shootout and put it up on YouTube. So people aren't really shying away from this stuff in some ways.
That's good. I got to check that out because I love crime history, and I didn't even know about that. Just really quickly, I want to say you mentioned something else in the story in the episode, that it's a fading legend, I think was maybe the phrase. And it's possible that if no new stories come out, people don't have this place to pilgrimage to and to check out for themselves. And a place that was a an infamous location for so long, it is fading away because we just, stories evolve and change. And sadly, when we're not around to keep carrying on the stories, they do fade. So it's interesting that you put that perspective on it. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Thank you. Thanks. That seems like a good place to end it.
Yes. We'll fade into a question.
Fade into a question. Well, like any good editor, I'm going to throw in one extra question before we let you both go. I'm curious, Scott, what you're investigating now. Where is your latest haunting taking you?
Oh, goodness. That is a tough question. There's so many places. I live in Madison, Wisconsin right now, and there is a place called Sanitarium Hill on the east side of town that was this huge tuberculosis sanitarium that closed down in the mid 60s. The building itself is still used by the city of Madison, and I think it's maybe the Parks Department or something along those lines. But the grounds are public, and anybody can go, and there's hiking trails through the woods. But these are the same woods that that once held a swimming pool and a sun deck type area for all of these victims dealing with tuberculosis. Where back in the day, they thought the cure or the treatment was just fresh air and sunshine. Those woods are intensely haunted right now, apparently. People, phantom mists going down the paths, even human-like figures walking around. People will even have their hair pulled. So there's somewhat aggressive entities there that are obviously conscious of us. So not just residual replays. So I guess that would be on the top of my list. There's a few places around, and I need to look into Rockford, Illinois a lot more. That's a kind of a spooky town with a whole bunch of these types of places. The gates to hell and Bloods Point Road and all of these legends that I really want to dive into Rockford a lot more and get to know. So if there's anybody from Rockford watching, give me all your tips, please.
Well, fine. Well, I'll have to go check out the sanitarium up in Matt. We had a sanitarium here in Chicago as well. We've done a story on. It's a very interesting piece of our history, talking about our history and how we once treated that illness. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for joining us here today. I think it was such a great story, as you both said, great way to dive into the history of this area that a lot of us, don't even know what's taken place in our own backyard. Scott Marcus, the paranormal researcher, author of Voices from the Chicago Grave. You've got a podcast, I think, as well that maybe people want to check out.
Yeah, it's called the Fantastic Story Society. We talk about the art of telling creepy stories, and you can find all those over at my website, which is whatsyourghoststory.com.
Which seems like a fitting way to celebrate Halloween and the intrepid book market. The intrepid Jeff Ruby, will you be out trick-or-treating, Jeff, later today?
I will be taking my child. It's true. We're not going up to Rainbow Road, though. I'll put it that way.
No. Well, thank you both for joining us. It's been so great to work on this story with both of you, and people can, again, check out both the article, see all kinds of pictures of the estate, what it looked like, or listen to the podcast. You can find it at wbez.org/Curious City. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care.